Dave Palumbo here with an RX Muscle News update. I'm here with Shawn Ray, and we are going to be discussing what's been going on in the industry lately. Shawn, I know a lot of people have been texting you, emailing you, PMing you, as well as me. What's going on in the bodybuilding industry? Why are we losing all these athletes? What the heck is happening to our industry? And you had emailed me and called me and said, this is something that I think really needs to be discussed. And I agreed with you 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening with a little more frequency. I'm sorry, can you hear my audio's okay? My audio's
Yeah,
good?
you're fine. Shawn's basically the old man of the sea today out there by the water.
I was out here doing some beach cardio.
Getting your vitamin D3 in, right?
Yeah, man. Well, I know you're 3 hours ahead of me, but nonetheless, yeah, it's kind of a pressing issue. I think there's a few things at work here. Let's be mindful. It's not really happening with more frequency. We have more availability to the news. Back in our days in the 80s and the 90s, we did not have the instant ability to hear breaking news. I mean, with the internet, we're hearing things in real time. And be mindful, we're not necessarily talking about active competitive bodybuilders. When you look at the landscape of some of these athletes that are dying, remember, Andy Hammond, who passed away this year, was not an active professional bodybuilder and hasn't been an active bodybuilder for many, many years. Phil Herndon, former USA champion, passed away earlier this year, had many, many complications, medically speaking. And he hadn't been a bodybuilder for 20 plus years. Andy Hammond had some surgery. He had some surgery on his elbow, which precipitated his passing. The biggest news was George Peterson, because it was 2 days before the Mr. Olympia, a humongous show, and we know it was an active competitive bodybuilder. But let's put things in perspective. With the passing of Shawn Rhoden, Shawn Rhoden could have been 5'9" on a good day. He's 290 pounds. He had a heart condition just a year ago. It wasn't long ago that he had something go on with an ulcer, and it kept him out of the Arnold Classic Championships. He was not an active competitive bodybuilder over the past 3 years. I don't believe that Shawn Rhoden was walking around at 290, 300 pounds natural. And let's be honest, if he was trying to plan some type of a comeback, he was in purgatory right now. He has a rape charge that was pending against him, which has got to cause tremendous stress. I imagine he might have been under some financial stress. And we know stress is one of the number one killers, especially among Black people. Stress is one of those things that can take you out. But when you're walking around, Dave, and you know this all too well, 290, 300 pounds, while the body gets bigger, the heart doesn't get bigger to facilitate the blood flow. I can imagine the blood was probably pretty thick. I can imagine that he wasn't in the best cardiovascular shape. And I spoke to his roommate. He said that Shawn was feeling ill prior to his passing and hadn't been to the doctor. I'm not even sure that Shawn actually had insurance. Now, that's not to say that it lessens or takes away from the fact that we lost a great champion and a great human being. But let's be honest. When we take a look at the bodybuilders and the things that we ignore, and we just pass off as to just having a bad day, I would really like to know when the last time Shawn had a physical. He might have been able to catch this. This was something, he had a pre-existing heart condition a year ago, 290. He was over 300 pounds. Stan, his roommate, has told me he was actually coming down. But if you look at his Instagram posts, 7 posts back, 290, shirt off, posing, saying that he's not smiling, but he's about to start making gains. Now, the Mr. Olympia 2022 is in December. It's 13 months away, and he is not on the schedule to compete. He hasn't been able to compete for several years because of this rape charge. Getting ready for what? Shawn hasn't been on a stage since he guest posed for Jim Mannion, where I kind of tore him apart, and a lot of other people did. He wasn't a healthy person. That doesn't mean he should have died. But when you're not healthy and things like this happen, you have various mitigating reasons that have nothing to do with the federation. It has nothing to do with competition. Shawn was not an active bodybuilder, so his passing, while tragic, says a lot more about how his state of his health than it does about the sport of bodybuilding.
I mean, I agree with you in the sense that obviously bodybuilding itself, puts a strain on the body, number one. Age, obviously, is a huge factor, and you can't discount that. He was, in his late 40s. And, the fact that, these guys necessarily don't go to the doctor and get the health checks that they should. All bad things mixed with COVID and vaccines, which we know predisposed to clotting and stuff like that, which might be responsible for some of these deaths that we're seeing in the last 2 years. However, there is a component that you mentioned, stress, and I think that Shawn was a person who really internalized his stress. He had the ulcers, which is a classic symptom of internalizing stress, and then of course not being able to support your family, for the last 2 years because of not being able to compete. Obviously, an impending trial that was due in the next month or two. I mean, I can't even imagine what he must have been feeling, going into this, because if he got convicted, he stood to possibly go to jail for over 10 years. So,
yeah, but none of that has anything to do with him being a professional bodybuilder. It has more to do with Shawn and the stress.
Well, I mean, do you feel that I understand when originally they kind of told him he couldn't do the Olympia, but
no,
AMI owned it.
not originally, from the onset, just like Shawn.
Well, when AMI said we don't want you in the Olympia because of whatever, don't you think at some point there should have been like a point where they said, you know what? This trial is not happening tomorrow.
No,
let's let this guy compete. He's innocent until proven guilty at this point. Do you think that, because I do believe that some of this stress was contributed to his ultimate heart attack due to the fact that he couldn't make a living for himself.
Yeah, but Dave, you cannot point the finger at the federation for standing by their word that, listen, this is a rape charge. There's 3 charges pending. It doesn't matter that it's being drug out. They need some conclusion. They need some results before they let you in to play. Is Deshaun Watson for Tennessee or for Texas, Houston, Texas? Is he playing football? He's got some charges against him. He's got a multi-million-dollar contract. And they said, no, you're on the sidelines until you settle this case. So we can't look back and try to erase the legal situation that Shawn's in. Listen, that thing could have gone to trial and Shawn could have been found guilty. We don't know. And
absolutely.
Now we will never know. So it's not something that we can look back in hindsight and put pass the buck in terms of stress on AMI or the federation. The federation did the right thing. I think they'd do it again in any other circumstance. I know that if it wasn't Shawn Rhoden and it happened to be John Doe, school teacher, you would probably not want that school teacher actively teaching your daughter.
You know what, Shawn? There's been guys that have been indicted on steroid charges or fraud charges. You know what? It's the same thing. You're innocent to prove guilty. But I don't blame, I don't blame anyone, because you know what? I blame the athlete. It's the onus of responsibility is on the athlete to check their health, okay? To go for the cardiac CT scans to see if your vessels are good, to go for the echocardiogram to see if your heart's good, to check your blood pressure on a daily basis, to check your blood sugars, because at the end of the day, the only person who's going to be the person paying the price is the person who dies.
Well, yeah,
okay, and their family, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the lesson here. If we have to glean anything from the passing of Shawn Rhoden, is that if you're an active competitive bodybuilder, run, don't walk, to the doctor, get those tests. There's nothing to fear from a doctor telling you that you're in great health, or even that your health is in decline. I would rather know so that I can mitigate those things from escalating. Listen, a lot of bodybuilders are unaware, especially the ones using growth hormone, insulin, and
look at Cali Muscle. He had 100% blockage. The guy didn't even know it. He had a heart attack. Thank God he's still alive.
Now, was that a year ago? I know that it came out now, but was that a while ago? Or was
no, I think it just happened.
Okay, because I saw it being posted, but another buddy of mine actually had the same situation. He waited a year until this happened with Shawn Rhoden to talk about it.
Right.
But here's what happens when these bodybuilders, and if you're listening, pay attention. When you get on this anabolics, growth hormone, or whatever else you're taking, your blood thickens, and it's harder for it to maneuver through the blood system. Therefore, a lot of doctors would recommend that you have your blood withdrawn, donate your blood, thin it out. And the only way you're going to know that is by going to a doctor to have your blood work done. George Farrar is very popular with saying, before I deal with any athlete, I want to get the blood work. Now, George is not a doctor, yourself included, but the blood work tells a big story that a bodybuilder cannot visually see in a mirror. I mentioned to you that Shawn Rhoden made a post on his IG about 7 posts back where he took a selfie with his shirt off saying that he's 290 and it's time to make more gains. Shawn Rhoden was never criticized as being too small. This is a Mr. Olympia winner. Making gains at 290 at 46 years old and over 290 pounds, 300 plus pounds, and haven't been actively competing in 3 years. Wasn't in the best cardiovascular shape, has a bad ticker already to begin with, and was potentially sick leading up to this thing. His roommate confirmed that Shawn wasn't feeling well, did not go to the doctor, and we don't know that COVID had something to do with this, but we know that we are in a pandemic, and it could.
I truly believe, Shawn, although there's no way to prove it, I believe that the COVID plus possibly the vaccine is
Well, wait.
predisposing
Nobody talked about
bodybuilders.
vaccine. Wait, no one talked about vaccine.
No, I don't think he got vaccinated. But I'm just saying in general, there are other athletes like George Peterson got vaccinated in April.
Yeah,
So
did I.
we know that the vaccine in some people is causing increased incidence of clots. And if you, like you said, if you have thick blood and you're not taking anything to thin your blood out or prevent, clots from forming, fish oil is the best anticoagulant out there, and it's natural and it's healthful. You could take 3 grams of fish oil a day and you'll never clot. But
Dave,
people are not taking these steps in today's society when we know that COVID is a real phenomenon. We know that the vaccine potentially can lead to that. You have to consider that in your regimen,
Yeah. Now, Shawn is the latest tragic example of a bodybuilder passing. We have bodybuilders passing all the time throughout the year. The difference is that we're seeing it with more frequency because of the availability of the news to travel faster than lightning. I mean, we didn't have that.
I don't buy that, Shawn. But we have a lot of deaths in this industry. We're reporting a death every week now.
No, you're right. And here's the thing. Who are we reporting it on? On active bodybuilders or just bodybuilders?
It doesn't matter. We're both. Both. That's the sad part. Both. I wish it was only inactives. It's not.
Well, no,
I mean, George Peterson's death. It's tragic. I have to believe that had there been more blood workups, that it would have been avoided. Look, Dallas McCarver if he would have had a cardiac CT scan, he would have known he had a blockage in his coronary artery, and he would be with us today.
Dallas McCarver's death was predictable. And that should have been a cautionary tale.
Predictable, but it could have been avoidable had he got the right diagnostic tests.
Well, and it could have been avoidable had he took some advice from people that were older and wiser. I predicted that death, Dave. You saw me do the YouTube video when I said that he had 6 or 7 months. Or no, I think he started working with Redcon One and Chad Nichols, and I off the cuff predicted that was a recipe for disaster.
When he passed out at the Australia Grand Prix, he knew that he had something cardiac going on. He should have been at the cardiologist when he got back home, and he should have had a cardiac CT scan. They could have stented him. He would have been fine.
He knew a week before when he was in New Zealand, when he was doing his Instagram or his Facebook Live, he was actually crying, talking about the condition that he felt. Brandon Curry won that show in New Zealand, and yet instead of coming home, he chose to continue on to Australia. These indicators, bodybuilders have a tendency just to ignore.
You're right.
When you're not feeling right, your metabolites are off, and you get the chills and this emotional breakdown. It's like, pump your brakes, man. It's not freaking worth it. But in Shawn's case, Shawn was not training for the Olympia. There was no pending competition around the corner, and there's actually no reason to be walking around at damn near 300 pounds at this point in Shawn's life. I think it was a big mistake that he was trying to continue to pursue this whole bodybuilding look, this whole bodybuilding lifestyle with all the mitigating factors, with the charges, with his daughter, with the finances, and with his health. It was just a recipe for disaster for Shawn.
There's 2 thoughts on this too. I'll give you my opinion, but the 2 camps are, number one, he was gearing up because he wanted to make the comeback because he needed money and he wanted to, try to, assume his, or regain his Olympia throne and get back to business as usual. The other series of thought, which is really what I'm a part of, with he should have taken the fact that he was Mr. Olympia and started coaching people and making another business for himself during this 2 years that he was away from the stage, rather than worry about competing. Because let's face it, at 46, how many years did he have left? Even if he could have won 2 more Olympias, I mean, eventually he's got to make a living, right? From the sport. I mean,
and part of what I talked about, Dave,
you need an estate plan. That's what you need,
Yeah, I mean, listen, like Shawn Clarita says, there is no plan B when you're training for that level of competition. But Shawn should have let that go once these charges were brought against him, and he hasn't been able to do anything for 3 years.
Or temporarily, at least,
Well, listen, temporarily. There is no bodybuilder at 46 and 47, sans Dexter Jackson and Albert Beckles and Vince Taylor, that at that advanced age is able to really do something. Shawn, some bodybuilders, this is a very addictive sport, Dave. You cannot protect everyone from themselves. And while you and I can sit back in the comfort of retirement and say, hey, go find plan B, for some bodybuilders, plan B is very elusive, and there is no plan B.
You're right.
They continue going and going and going until the wheels fall off. And I've known several bodybuilders that Vince Comerford died in the gym, right? He was no longer bodybuilding. He was a former addict, and I know Shawn had some drug issues as well. So when you start looking into someone's past, It's almost like building a wall. You take these little bricks and you build them all up, all these little episodes, and then you have this big complete wall that you can't get through. And for Shawn, I think the last brick was even the thought of trying to make a comeback in professional bodybuilding, which I believe is his ultimate demise.
You know, Shawn, this is a controversial statement, and I've said it, and I respect the Masters guys that compete because, you know, I help a lot of Masters guys, you know, who are on the amateur level and mostly on the amateur level. And I understand the desire to want to be better than yourself and get up there and look your best. But the truth of the matter is, and I'm sure this is the truth for you and me because we both retired early, I always said I wasn't going to compete after 35 years of age because I knew that I put a huge strain on my body prior to that. I knew that I was pushing my body hard, and I said, you know what? If I can't achieve what I have to by 35, I'm done. You know, and that's exactly what I did. And I know you did pretty much the same thing. And I think it's dangerous over 40 years old to be pushing some of the protocols that these guys are doing. And I think that it's important that we mention that. Yeah, you should get your health checks, and it's important. But even with health checks, sometimes the body just can't take that kind of, you know, abuse at an older age.
Yeah, it's a cautionary tale to anybody that's over 40. Mind you, Dave, like yourself and me, we got started very young. So we were able to get out young. A lot of guys stick around and they kind of raise their family, do their business. Then they hit 30, 35. And then it's time to pursue this dream. Yeah. Don Youngblood is a classic example who got a very late start. And then he got a small taste of victory over Vince Taylor by winning the 2001 Masters Olympia. Decided that he wanted to raise the bar, go into the Open Olympia, which I thought was a mistake at his age. He went into that and he got dead last and was motivated to come back and do better because he had embarrassed himself so much. So what did he do? He wanted to get much bigger at the age of 52, 315 pounds, 52 years old. It was just a Molotov cocktail waiting to explode within inside of his chest. And he did. He wound up having a heart attack. I think if you're a Masters guy over 40, you really got to consider the fact that, you know what, that's a natural division. If you want to go into it and you got a late start and you're trying to get up on stage because this is where your passion lies, yeah, do it. But I think your best bet and the safest bet is to do it natural. There is nothing waiting for you when you win the Masters National Championships to go on and think that you're going to compete in the open category and win a bunch of prize money and glory and fame. I've seen a lot of great natural bodybuilders. John Hansen is one. That went on to do very good things in natural division. Skip LaCour comes to mind. It's possible.
Wouldn't you like to, Shawn, though, don't you think the solution is not drug testing? Because you know that doesn't solve anything. Because there's ways to beat these tests. I believe, and I know Flex Lewis I said it 5 years ago, but Flex Lewis reiterated on a video recently, and I agree with this, that there should be a health check. If you're an IFBB pro, you should have to go through a yearly health check with certain tests that have to be performed, whether it be a cardiac CT, echocardiogram, blood pressure check, blood sugar, and you should have to submit. That should have to be submitted to the IFBB main office to get clearance to compete. Well, I mean, why not? Every other sport, you have to take a physical every year to be able to compete. Football, baseball. Why not have a health check necessary? And I'm not saying the IFBB should pay for it. I'm just saying you can go to your own physician. They have a certain protocol. Certain tests you have to have done, submit it to them. And if the doctor clears you, you're good to compete for the year.
Yeah, to play devil's advocate on that, you get your IFBB Pro League card in January. You're not going to compete until October, November.
So what?
I'm just saying. George Peterson died 2 days before the Olympics.
Right, but maybe if he would have had a health check 8 months before that, they would have said, hey, you got a blockage in your heart or whatever the case may be. You know, obviously you can't.
What I'm saying is if George Peterson was healthy in March and he died 2 days before the Olympia,
don't know if he was healthy in March because he never got a physical or anything.
Yeah, but this is a sport of individuals, right? We have to people are not putting their own health first. Dave, these athletes are listening to coaches that are not doctors.
If you don't tell my son that he can't bring toys to school with him, he's going to shove the toys in his bag and bring them to school with him. But if he knows his bag is going to get checked when he gets there, he's not bringing anything. No, you got to make these guys go get the health checks. If you don't do it, they're not going to do it, Shawn.
Well, it's a double-edged sword. These athletes, some are paying coaches a tremendous amount of money to listen to what their coach says, and they take whatever the coach tells them to take. And the coaches on the other, you're in New York right now, you're in Florida, I'm in California. This is how some of the athletes and coaches communicate. And whatever protocol my coach tells me to take, I take it because my coach is more experienced and my coach is telling me. There's a lot of naivety in these bodybuilders. They will listen to their coach and do what their coach says, and the coach isn't even in the room to do a visual on these athletes. And just like this girl over in Italy, dealing with Shelby Starnes back in the day, she wound up passing away and her coach wasn't even there. I don't know that this is something that the federation can control with
they're not going to control what goes on a daily basis, Sean, but they can get a health clearance at the beginning of the year. In order to give you a valid IFBB pro card, you have to have a health clearance.
I like
now,
that idea.
That's not going to, right. If someone does something crazy, it takes 40,000 diuretics the day before a show and drops dead of a heart attack, we can't stop that. But we can stop people who have 90% blockages in their coronary arteries and don't know it. Or their cardiac output of their heart is 20% when it should be, 50, 60%. These things we can diagnose ahead of time so that we don't have these. The person doesn't wake up one day or they walk into the room and they drop to the kitchen floor because they didn't even know that they're walking around with, like you said, a time bomb waiting to go off.
Hey, it's not a bad idea. I would definitely put that in writing, submit it to the IFBB Pro League and the NPC, that when you register for your NPC card, when you register for your IFBB Pro card, that you submit a health check. And the IFBB, as just before they issue the card, they see is this person right or wrong? I mean, the athlete, if I get a health check, I'm not submitting for my NPC card because I know I'm not healthy, right? Like you said.
And maybe those people will go to take the steps to get healthy because of that, because they want to get the card,
It is a start that I don't think costs anybody any money.
Nope, zero.
It's a step in the right direction. And we're adding all these divisions, and we have the Masters USA Championships. I think we have the Masters Nationals, and
Gary's got some big World Pro Masters Championships coming up.
Yeah,
Gary.
and I don't know that it's incumbent upon the individual promoters to monitor this, but
nope, it should be the IFBB that requires the health check. That's how you have to do it.
Hey, it's worthy of conversation.
Yeah, I think so.
But now listen. Will it stop the bodybuilder that hasn't competed in 20 years from having a heart attack and dying, and people going, "What's going on with all these bodybuilders dying?" No. I mean, people are going to die.
Look, you can't police everyone, but we can police the people that are getting up on stage and at least are actively competing. If you want an active IFBB or NPC card, you got to get a health clearance.
I've been writing about the passings and the loss of life of bodybuilders literally since I retired in 2001. And every year, the list is getting bigger. Of course, 2021 has just been it's decimated our industry.
Yeah, and 2022 is bad.
2020, but listen, in these past 2 years, with all the things happening in the world, and we know COVID loves people that are overweight. COVID loves our athletes. The lesson here is to run, don't walk to get your physical. Run, don't walk to get checked out, because I know some bodybuilders are scared out there. But I mean, not to be scared of the doctor. I mean, whatever protocols you're taking, you don't know what's happening internally, and it's more important, especially for life after. I remember Mike Tyson said he blew $300 million because he didn't know if he was going to live past the age of 40. So why not? But I got to tell you now, as a grandfather, Mike, you get this different perspective on longevity. Like, you and I are both our best years are behind us, so we've got to be able to be here for the people that we brought into the world, and try to recreate the years that we gave up selfishly bodybuilding. This bodybuilding stuff for the Masters, the bodybuilding stuff for these guys coming up, absolutely start with your physical, with your blood work, and don't leave this in the hands of guesswork with coaches, because a lot of them just assume the coach knows what they're talking about, and I'm going to do what my coach says, and that's on the external. You've got to get internally checked.
I give a lot of these guys some tough medicine, Sean. I look, when I work with people, I'm pretty honest, and because I don't want to see anyone die on my watch, that's for sure. So when people tell me they don't feel good, or I have them go get checked out, and if their tests are off, I'm like, you got to fix this first. We got to get your kidney function back in order. We got to get your blood cells proper. Or I tell them, look, this is really not anything to worry about. But a lot of times people complain they have chest pain, I have this, I have indigestion. You know what? Go to the hospital, go to the urgent care, get an EKG done. Just rule it out. It's better safe than dropping dead of a heart attack. And don't think that it ain't gonna happen to me, Sean, because that's the mentality that a lot of bodybuilders have. Ain't gonna happen to me.
Yeah, right? I have my Hawaiian Classic coming up here November the 20th. I just got back from Switzerland, Reno, Nevada, and Las Vegas. I took my negative COVID test. I scheduled my doctor's appointment for next Tuesday before I fly out to Hawaii. on general principle, why not? I'm paying for my health insurance. I'm going to take advantage of it just to make sure everything's happening right. If I have high cholesterol,
have you had a cardiac CT scan done?
I'm setting all that stuff up now because, like I
cardiac
told you,
CT, number one thing over 40 you should get done. It's non-invasive. It takes 5 minutes, and you'll know if you have any blockages in your coronary arteries. I mean, if that's not a weight off your back to know that you have open, vessels, I don't know what else is. Why wouldn't you want to have that done? It's the easiest test to do.
Yeah, and again, I probably wouldn't be thinking this way if it weren't for the passing of Shawn Rhoden. I mean,
I'm glad that you are, because you don't know. You might have a blockage. Who the heck knows? Until you check it out.
And I can tell you, at my age, I would rather know than not know. And this is where the bodybuilders just ignore.
Of course you
would. Shawn's roommate told me that he didn't want to go to the hospital, and he didn't know if Shawn had insurance, and he didn't feel good for several days before this. This was not something that happened. It wasn't like he was walking and talking and suddenly he dropped. This was a gradual thing that happened with Shawn, and did not pay attention to the symptoms, and the symptoms took him out. And that means it could happen to any of us. He had some mitigating factors, which are always typical of a meathead bodybuilder like us. We just ignore the pain, we ignore the signs, and then boom, it's too late. I think the people that have had close calls are starting to come out and talk about those close calls that they've had. A guy like Rich Piana and Dallas McCarver, these guys I looked at and I saw this was pretty predictable. These guys don't look healthy to me. Whatever protocols they're doing, there's got to be a price to pay. So if your gut tells you that you're a little bit scared of what you're doing as a bodybuilder, if your conscience tells you that maybe the advice that your coach is giving you is questionable, run, don't walk to the doctor. The doctors are your friend. They're not your enemy. They are trained professionals to tell you what's happening internally, which we cannot guess.
Right. Some of these doctors don't know how to interpret some of these tests, but that's why you have people, like myself, who can help. And there's other doctors that I can refer people to that do know how to interpret the tests when they come out a little off. Some people, Shawn, will have high kidney function, but it actually has nothing to do with the fact that their kidneys are in danger. And you can go for other tests to check that out. Likewise with liver enzymes. A lot of bodybuilders have very high liver enzymes, and it has nothing to do with their liver. It's because they work out really hard, and that raises those enzyme levels up because those enzymes are coming from the muscle cells. So there are things that you should worry about, and then there are things that you don't necessarily need to worry about, and you have to decipher between the two because bodybuilders are a different beast, and our blood work and our diagnostic tests don't always look normal. So you got to find a doctor that understands athletes. Don't go to just your country bumpkin doctor who's going to tell you, "Oh, do steroids." You gotta find someone who understands the athletic mind and how the body works.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're going to take the time to seek out a coach, if you're going to take the time to get some tanning and some hair and some makeup specialist, do the research on a medical exam. It's not that hard. It's actually one of the easier things to do. If you're going to invest any money, invest it in your healthcare. We know a lot of these guys, like myself, are independent contractors,
right?
And that is a good investment in
the tax write-off to you.
Absolutely. I'm not waiting for the federation to tell me to go check on my health.
Right.
I mean, my conscience, the body count tells me that this is something that I need to do. And mind you, I'm not holier than thou. I was a user. I did my thing. I don't consider myself lucky, but there's a difference in use and abuse. I did an article on size kills. There is a direct correlation to being big, overweight, huge, and muscular, and an early passing. I mean, the wrestlers, a lot of the football players, and of course, a lot of our bodybuilders. And the list is long.
There's no 300-pound 60-year-olds walking around. That's what Romano
you just don't
says,
see them. You don't see them. And when you start talking body weights, Greg Kovacs, right? Nasser El-Sabati. I mean, Luke Sandow, Dallas McCarver.
Luke was a different situation.
Yeah, but I get it. But I'm just saying, when you're that big, things can go wrong, horribly wrong. And Shawn Rhoden, keep it in mind, 5'9", 290, 300 pounds at 46 years old, was a walking time bomb, unfortunately. So if you're in that group, you got to make sure that you get checked out. And there's some active bodybuilders doing very well today that need to hear that loud and clear, that run, don't walk to the doctor.
Ignorance is no excuse. And I think that's the take-home message. You can't, we don't know what causes people to die or not die, but at least if you know what your weaknesses are, you can address them. If you don't go to the doctor and you don't get these diagnostic tests done, you don't know. And you're walking around blind. It's stupid. You wouldn't go, no one goes into a bodybuilding diet prep not knowing how to eat properly and how to train, right? You don't blindly go into the gym and just say, I'm going to train legs today. No, because you have a plan in place. And it's the same thing with diagnostic tests. You have to know what tests you need to get done on a regular basis to make sure that what you're doing to your body is not harming it in some way. And that's the take-home message.
Great advice. And let me tell you, we don't blame the NFL when a player gets paralyzed or blows out an ACL. We don't blame NASCAR when someone rams their car into a wall at damn near 200 miles an hour, crash and burn. It's not an organizational thing. This is an individual sport. This is a thing where you got to prioritize your health. Don't leave it to the federation. Don't leave it to your coach. Don't leave it to your training partner. This is something where you get from it what you put into it. Prioritize your health. It may prolong your life.
Yeah, and I really want to see health checks being mandatory in the future. It's something that can be implemented very easily. And you know what? If sometimes you got to give these guys a kick in the ass to go to the doctor. If this is the kick in the ass, hey, you're not going to get an IFBB Pro card, or you're not going to get your NPC card unless you get this health check. I'm telling you, everyone will do it. Dave, thank you, Shawn, for joining us today and working through this. I know a lot of people are walking around very, very, not knowing what's going on, and I feel terrible too. I've been walking around all day with this horrible feeling because I know that this Shawn Rhoden thing was avoidable, and it really upsets me that we lost another great athlete.
Yeah, it hits very close to home, and if nothing else, what you said about putting that on the table, at least opening it for conversation with the federation, is definitely a step in the right direction. So I'll definitely make sure that the higher ups hear that message.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Shawn, and thank you guys for listening and joining us. This is Dave Palumbo with Shawn Ray for another RX Muscle News Update.